Yes, another story about the cross-gen cycle with PS4, PS5, now going into PS5 Pro, and actually we are kind of in that landscape where we're halfway through PS5, so we are getting those very early rumors about PlayStation 6, but that's what feels so weird about PS4, where the console, on appearance, it does feel like it's been sticking around for a lot longer than usual, and that's true to a degree, but also not so much in other areas, so we did have a story pop up recently that is pointing us in that direction of the console having a pretty standard decay curve when it comes to it being the outgoing platform. So what popped up recently was this article on IGN a few days ago where they were speaking with the Monster Hunter and Sonic developers about PS5 Pro, and they were asking them how they felt about the console, and they gave unsurprisingly very different answers. So the Monster Hunter series producer Ryozo Sugimoto were pretty positive about the console. They want to support it right away for Monster Hunter Wilds being this very, graphically intensive game and things like that, so that all kind of stacks up there. But the Sonic team producer, Takashi Iizuka, they said they want to keep focusing on the previous generation as well, so that as many people as possible can keep playing Sonic games. They said, and I quote here, "As a market, we have the high-end machines, high-end consoles. Coming out with those consoles, we feel that we can make newer Sonic games that can express the speed of Sonic and with much better gaming UI as well. However, we want to support the lower spec constants as well, so even though the PS5 Pro is coming out, or new innovations or new technology are coming out, we feel that it is important to support the lower spec consoles and let many of the users keep playing Sonic." Now, that's not where the story ends, though, because then this was picked up by Derek Strickland over at Tweaktown, where the way they wanted to phrase the story, or at least focus on one portion of that story, was this headline where they say Sega and Sonic Team will continue supporting PS4 to ensure higher sales potential, which is true. That's one portion of the story that they wanted to cover, and so this was then reposted by Matt Piscatella of Circana, which tracks video game sales data here in the US, and this is what I wanted to touch on because Matt gives some very interesting insight, which I think we all sort of knew, but he does outline this further. He says, "This news had me digging into recent PS4 new game sales, and let's just say that this approach is, I'll call it optimistic. PS4s are active, sure. They're Fortnite, Call of Duty, GTA 5, and Roblox machines, shrug." And he does say for Fortnite, 1/3 of all active PS4 users played Fortnite in September, which is a massive amount of players. I mean, this kind of goes back to a recent conversation which focused on that one slide that came out of Sony's recent business segment briefing, where it showed this sort of even split between the active users on PSN right now, where it is a nearly even split between PlayStation 5 and PS4. And, when that news came out, there was a lot of conversation around how that was like somehow weird or unusual, or oh, PS4 is still around, why haven't they killed this console yet, and why are developers still supporting it? But it's like, why, we're halfway through the cycle, half of the users have bought into PlayStation 5, and that is a pretty natural curve as far as like when people are going to, at a certain point, finally jump into the next console cycle. It's not like 1 or 2 years into PlayStation 5 being out, and certainly with the circumstance of it not being widely available, people are just in droves, 100+ million users are going to buy the new console. It simply doesn't work like that. So that was always, and it still is, like a really strange thing, even to this day when people are complaining about PS4 and how long it's been sticking around. But this does imply exactly what that story also circles around to, which is PS4, it feels like it's been sticking around longer than usual, but we still have every indicator in the book that this has been a fairly straightforward cycle and transition period. The outlier being that, this console, while PS4 and 5 are just so similar to one another as far as the system architecture and actually shipping and making games for them, it's a very simple process. It's not even remotely close to what we saw with certain transitionary periods from, say, PS1 to 2, or 2 to 3, and even more so from 3 to 4, which, 3, we all know it's the cell processor, kind of a pain in the ass system to make games for, and so to, have this cross-gen cycle of making cell processor games and then x86 titles, it's not nearly as financially advantageous versus what we're seeing nowadays. And the other angle that I often bring this up, and I still can't wrap my head around what people don't seem to understand about this, the vast majority of games coming out nowadays, pound for pound, don't necessarily have to only be on PlayStation 5. It really is that sort of PC meme where it's like $2,000 PC to play Counter-Strike and Minecraft. you know what I mean? Like you can just browse PSN naturally. Most of that stuff it's perfectly fine on PlayStation 4, right? And you're not losing out on the benefits you get with PlayStation 5, being the super fast loading, higher frame rates, higher resolution, because diminishing returns and all that, right? That's sort of the usual expected returns you'll see on newer consoles, and thus PS5 Pro comes in, PlayStation 6 down the road at some point as well. But I guess to circle back to the real conversation starter here is that PS4 is in this like decay curve of like a lot of new game sales probably are not really doing all that well over there. And now Matt is laying it out there, at least here in the US, which is new game sales. He's saying that approach would be optimistic for Team Sonic to continue shipping Sonic games over on that console. Now, at a certain point, like, it won't make sense, but the thing is, it's still, and I would have to imagine it's a lot more fiscally advantageous to where shipping on PS4 still has that upside, right? Not in the same manner from, again, previous console cycles. If the cost to ship on PlayStation 4 is so low that even a 5% return might be worth it to ship on PS4, even if these games end up doing like abysmal sales on PlayStation 4. If it's that cheap to ship a native PS4 version and you're still going to make money on it, then go ahead and do it. And that's why PS4 is still kind of stuck around for as long as it appears to be on paper. But I mean, yeah, this console is likely going to be this sort of legacy machine for free-to-play titles. I mean, especially when you look at what happened with PlayStation 3 in that outgoing platform cycle, that being the first truly like HD internet connected consoles. I mean, we check in on PlayStation 3 every year for those online communities, and it's very similar in a manner, right? It's a lot of, these niche communities and a few hardcore faithful that really loved, those games. It's not like you're going to find one person playing, 30, 40, 50 different games online on PlayStation 3. It's typically the kind of folks that like really love one game, and that's the game that they stick to, and they might still really enjoy the benefit of having, or rather not having to pay for PlayStation Plus. And PS4, with all those free-to-play titles, those don't need Plus as well. So at a certain point, they're not really the same users that are probably going to be buying games as frequently as somebody that would have already went out and bought a PS5 and started buying PS5 versions of cross-gen games, right? At a certain point, those that are staying on PS4 or PS3, they're just legacy owners that want to enjoy the consoles in their own unique way. They might be tied to one particular game, or they might be children, or those that are financially not in the best place to just go out and buy a PlayStation 5, and if there's no pressure or need to because they're enjoying all these free-to-play live service games that are still to this day seeing content updates, why would you not just stay on PlayStation 4? They're different owners at that point, different buyers. Dare I say lack of buyers, because they're not running out and like constantly buying new PS4 software and things like that. Those kind of buyers are moving over to PS5 at a much faster rate, or a natural rate, I should say. So PS4, in a way, it has stuck around a lot just due to the nature of how games are made and shipped nowadays and how they look, and you're not really losing benefits by having PS4 versions still around, and some of the really high-end stuff is finally leaving PlayStation 4. So it's not like there's really been any sort of, I would say, major impedance in the way that I think some tend to phrase this conversation. But a lot of those PS4 users, I think those are the legacy years that PS4 is going to see, very similar to PlayStation 3, which is a lot of those online active communities that are going to stay on for as long as they can until those games get shut down. And then they reverse engineer them and they make them playable again. Like, PS4 is kind of still in that same landscape. It would be interesting to see where that tipping point is, where even if it's a lot more affordable to ship a native PS4 game versus again, PlayStation 3 back in the day during that cross-gen cycle, at a certain point it's still not worth it. Regardless of what the game is on paper, if it can easily have a PS4 version, if it's just not worth it, and every single studio is going to have to figure out resource-wise what is or is not worth it. But at a certain point, then yeah, even some of the low-end stuff might not bother shipping on PlayStation 4 anymore, right? That, and also Sony at a certain point, well into its legacy years, will just shut down game submissions, so that's also entirely possible as well. But PS4 will enter those legacy years, and it might look very familiar to what we see with PlayStation 3. Anyway, thank you for joining me in this conversation. I'll see you all in my next video. You take it easy.